Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce, the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be Seth David Chernoff. And he's going to be talking about a new book that he's got out called A Manual for Living, subtitled Connections, if I got that title down correctly. He's been on once before about Manual for Living, subtitle, I think it was Reality if memory serves, and I'm sure he can correct me on that in just a minute. He's a cancer survivor, and his goal is to kind of light the path to happiness through human connection, which I'm quite sure a lot of y'all might want to say we've heard this here before, but, you know, if it's worked for him, it could work for you is what I'm thinking. You know, we can all sure enough try to at least give an ear and have an open mind. So, Seth, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Royce. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Was I right about those book titles?
Yes, Manual for Living Reality was the one we were on talking about last time, and this one is called Connection, just came out a few weeks ago.
Now, this is a continuation of the last one, am I correct?
Yeah, it's a series. There's 3 books in the series. The first one is all about our relationship to kind of being human, how we relate to money and time and illness and death and life. And the second book, Connection, is all about kind of taking that deeper. It's all about our inner connection to our truth, our relationships to one another, and kind of how we take that out into the world.
So kind of like sort of taking an inventory of yourself and how you relate to yourself as well as to others, would you say?
Yeah, kind of. And the basis for it is that, you know, when things happen in life, because they always do, whether it's illness or the loss of somebody we care about, we have a tendency to feel all alone. And it's really these interconnections that we have through our own truth with each other that allow us to feel like we're not alone and to understand that we're all going through many of the same things.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, they do feel like they're, well, one way that I've heard it put before was an island unto themselves, and I don't really think anybody can be an island unto themselves when everything's interconnected.
Yeah, I agree with you, although it does feel that way sometimes. And at the end of the day, we are really alone. I mean, we go to bed, fall asleep on our own, we deal with pain on our own, we deal with death on our own, even though we may have people with us. Many parts of this journey are on our own. They're independent of anybody else. However, the fact of being human, of relating in this physical environment requires that we be connected to one another. So I think it's a balance, but I think we have to remember that being connected is what makes this human experience so great.
Kind of drawing the line between where do I look out for myself without expecting help or giving help, and kind of where do I give and get both at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of like what you were saying. It's like, where do I stop? Where do I start and where do I stop? Like, where does my being end in this world? And it's like you said, we are all interconnected, but it's how we accept that even when we're going through situations and feeling things that we don't think that anybody else is dealing with.
Yeah, and a lot of times when we're at our downest, we don't want to reach out. We don't want people reaching out to us, and we, I know, tend to snap at people or, you know, push people away. Really probably not always the best thing in the world we can do, but again, we do deal with human nature.
We do. And as you know, I'm a cancer survivor. We've talked about this on the last time I was on your show, and it's those kind of traumatic situations where, you know, you have to deal with your own inner demons. You know, you have to look yourself in the eye and accept that, you know, if death is the outcome, then you have to make peace with it, and if it's not, then you have to understand that you can find gratitude for life. And it's like you said, you can either choose to, you know, be grateful and kind to these people in this world, or you can be begrudging and angry and upset and make your entire life experience a reflection of those inner feelings.
Well, you know, it sounds to me like, Seth, you hit the nail right on the head when you said make peace with yourself, because I think so much of what really causes a lot of the problems with connecting with yourself as well as with other humans is the things that we're not willing to make peace with.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think a lot of times we kind of try to ignore some of the things that we face. And first and foremost, we do have to make peace with ourselves. It's kind of like in a relationship, you have to be able to love yourself first before you can ever fully love another. You know, but we have a tendency to look outside of ourselves for what we really need. We look outside for love. We look outside for fulfillment, and we'll never find it there.
That is true. So many people, I mean, I've heard people preach on this here, and for years it never really sank home to me until I got older, but it did eventually sink that, people think, well, if I get a nicer house, I'll be happy. If I get a better car, I'll be happy. And so much of the time, once they get what they want, they're still looking because they found out that they were wrong. That wasn't what they wanted in the first place. And then the few people that seem like they really are happy, they're contented with their lot in life, and they don't have no problem with being happy.
Yeah, it's very true. It's kind of like wherever you go, there you are. If you're in a bad relationship and you don't learn the lesson, but you get out of it, before you know it, you'll find yourself in a similar situation, and you'll wonder, how come the same kind of women keep showing up in your life, or the same kind of people, or the same kind of jobs, or the same kind of bosses? And unless we're willing to do the work and learn the lessons and grow, we're the ones that have to live with the choices that we make. And so it is very true. It's really who we choose to be in this life that is the limiter between a mediocre life and a life well lived.
So would you say then, in your opinion, that what's taking place here is the law of attraction? People are attracting the kind of people that they're actually mirroring on the inside, for example?
I do think there's some of that, but it's so much deeper than that. It's not based on who we're attracting from the outside. It's based on who we're choosing to be from the inside, not because we want to attract anything, but because we choose that in this life we are going to take control of our path to greatness. And that means taking responsibility for who we're being and the actions that we're taking. Now, that will naturally be reflected in the outside world, but it starts from within ourselves. So, and I think that's kind of a key distinction, is that we have to first make choices that have us feel good about our life and good about ourselves. And then as we do that, yes, people will be attracting their life, but we will also be making decisions in our world that are consistent with our truth. And over time, our entire environment will be consistent with that truth.
It sounds like a toss-old axiom, physician, know yourself.
Know yourself. And I think in the end of the first book, I think at the very last chapter, I have a quote on every chapter, as you may remember, and the last one is know thyself. And I think that's what life's all about, is that it really is our own inner journey that will take us through this life and allow us to tap into whatever is our unique purpose in life.
Which that, of course, explains why there's so many people. You always hear people talk about them. I wish I could be like this athlete, or I wish I could be like that movie star, or this author, or that author, or whatever the case may be, because they're not achieving the goals that they want to achieve, and they're looking on the outside instead of on the inside.
Yeah, and that is the way our society is based. If you look at the way we identify ourselves when we meet people, what do? Well, I'm a doctor, I'm a janitor, I'm a nurse, I'm a father, I'm a cancer survivor. We have this identity for ourselves that we put out into the world, but that identity really isn't who we are. It's a reflection of the past. And so we really do get to choose who we're going to be in any given moment. That doesn't have to be a reflection of that outside identity. Yet our society definitely looks towards that identity, like you said, whether we're a celebrity athlete or whether we have a certain amount of money or a certain kind of car. But the only way to access freedom in our life is to relinquish that and to realize that we are really only who we choose to be in this moment.
Which would mean also that you don't want to try to own anything that anybody tries to label you with.
You can't really. I mean, think about it. Even in the world of sports, which is definitely a hot subject, in the world of sports, you have sports teams that are outstanding and excellent, but they're only as good as they are in any given moment. One team wins, one team loses. The next week, that same team may lose, and then that team isn't quite as good technically as they were the week before. It's kind of like how we are in life. We might do something really great in 1 week, but next week maybe we're not as kind, we're not as gracious, we're not as friendly, we're not as giving. Well, it's only who we are in this moment that makes all the difference. It really has very little to do with who we've been in the past.
Yeah, I know that a lot of the ancient gurus or sages or shaman, they always taught that there really is only the eternal now, and that time as we understand it is, it's more illusionary for the three-dimensional world. I don't know if you've read anything about that or not, but you do sound like you've studied something along spiritual teachings somewhere. Am I correct?
My spiritual teachings has kind of been through the life of hard knocks, which probably is kind of the way most of us do it. And I think that's why I wrote the Manual for Living, is I felt like that people didn't have to step in the same potholes that I did again and again and again. I feel like that there's a path to happiness and fulfillment that doesn't have to involve as much pain and suffering as I went through to get here. And so that was the whole premise for writing the book, but I do think that there's a lot of wisdom out there. And what I always tell people, and it even says it in the beginning of the book, is this information isn't new. I mean, the information that people teach and talk about is the same as it's been for thousands of years. The problem is that we haven't really learned it. We haven't accepted it, we haven't embraced it, and we haven't lived our life according to the truth of this existence. And so the Manual for Living is really designed to help us do that now in a format that allows us to tap into it. So I think there's a lot of spiritual teachings that kind of come together, but if you look at them, if they're based in the greatness of the human spirit, then they're all the same.
Which makes a lot of sense. Now, if I understand correctly, though, you're not just a cancer survivor, but you're a 2-time cancer survivor?
That's right. I had cancer twice because, like we were talking about earlier, sometimes you have to go through things twice to learn the lesson and figure things out. And I always tell people it was one of the greatest blessings that ever happened to me because it allowed me to waken up. And my life was great before then. I had a great company that I was running, had a great family. My life really was fantastic. But after cancer, it got even better because it allowed me to see and listen to my own truth that I had been ignoring for so very long.
Yeah, I've heard tell that near-death experiences, you didn't have one, but still, people that either come close or get really sick or hit the bottom of the barrel or have a near-death, they usually come back with a whole entirely new approach to life, and many times they have a whole new appreciation for life that they never realized that they had before.
Well, there is something about facing death that wakes you up. And it's not that we don't know we're going to die. We all know in our mind that eventually this physical existence will terminate. That doesn't seem to be the problem. The problem seems to be that we ignore it and we refuse to believe it. And you know as well as I do, 1,000,000 times a year, we'll live in the moment. You don't know how much time you have. But until you've dealt with traumatic illness or until you've stood next to somebody you cared about and watched them pass away, your relationship to death is kind of amorphous. So once you've been through that, though, you realize how little time that we actually have. And many times that's what wakes you up to the greatness of life and allows you to have the strength and courage to make better decisions in your life.
Yeah, I can tell you that my sister, she died at age 42. My brother-in-law died at age 52, and that kind of pointed out to me that, hey, we really are not guaranteed tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? So many people, they say, well, the average person lives till they're 70, or some of them live till 80, some live till 90. I probably got to at least till 70, and then something snaps and they come that close. They're like, well, maybe I don't have all the time I thought I had. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. Is that even though that you're right, they publish what the average life expectancy of U.S. citizens, for example, is, there are still people who die every single day, every single hour, every single minute. And so if it's not you, then you better be making choices in your life that are consistent with your truth, living your life in a way that's consistent with who you want to be in this world.
So that would include, like, say, if you go job seeking, try to seek out a profession and doing something that you enjoy doing so that you can flourish in it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's even deeper than that. It's how we show up in this world. I get a lot of people who call me or email me and say, gosh, I just don't like my job, and I don't think I get another one, or I just don't like my life, I don't like my relationship, how do I get out of it? And really in life, there's only two things that we can't control. We worry about everything. We think we control all kinds of stuff, but really there's only two things that we control in life. It's who we choose to be in any moment, and then the actions we take as a result of that. So who we're being and the actions we're taking. And so what I always tell people is you have to base your life in a sense of service, in a sense that's consistent with your truth. So it really doesn't matter what your job is, whether you're a janitor or a teacher or a nurse. It makes no difference what career occupation you have. It still needs to be based in service in order that you're going to be fulfilled with every part of your being and rewarded emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and financially.
Yeah, I've heard teachings before that there's a lot of good to come out of being in service to others versus being in service to yourself. And well, I'm quite sure you know as well as I do that the majority of the world nowadays is in service to themselves, which you might say the modern day age of technology might have lended toward this kind of narcissism. but it's probably also led to a lot of people living less happy lives than what they used to, say, back in the days of the West or whatever.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Royce. I think that we do have to take care of ourselves, and I do think we do have to look after ourselves to some degree, but as you've said, we've gone overboard. We've gone so far to taking care of ourselves that we've disregarded everybody else. And I think that the only way to really be fulfilled in life is to be of service, whatever it is that you're doing. Again, it doesn't matter. It's not about the activities that you're doing in life. It's about what comes from behind it. And for me, I've just found that being of service is the only way to be truly happy. There's no other way. It's like you said earlier, there's a lot of people in this world with a lot of money, a lot of houses, a lot of cars, many of them not happy. But you look at the people who are of service, doesn't matter how much money they have, and they're happy.
And they're also, they're the kind of people, they know more people because of the work that they're actually doing. They're getting out. They're not just sitting around in front of a TV or, staying at the corner restaurant or whatever the case may be, but they're getting out to help people in the process. They're meeting more people, and they're making more friends, in other words. Yeah,
and many times by being of service, by putting service first, you'll actually make more money. And not only will you be happier, more fulfilled, but you'll be more successful at whatever it is you're doing. And we talk about, yesterday I was talking to a friend about being in a sales job. And sales is one of the greatest, oldest occupations in the world. It's all about relationships. It's all about connecting. But if you do it from a sense of service, where you're there to give, to provide value to your company, to your customer, to whoever it is you're dealing with, you generally will get more sales. You'll be more successful. But regardless if you do or you don't, you'll know that you'll be integritous within yourself. You'll be showing up from a way that's consistent with your own truth.
Well, I think you just said a key word, at least to my way of thinking, and that word was integrity. To me, it seems like when you show integrity, that lends into your self-esteem, which also tends to come out in your manifestation and how you deal with others.
Absolutely.
Because you can feel, oh, hey, I feel pretty good that I'm doing what's right. I feel good that I'm helping somebody. I feel better about myself. I'm not just being selfish and, what have you. And then the more you feel like that, the more you want to do, in other words.
Yeah, because you're consistent with your truth. You're following a path that you know contains integrity with who you're being in life. And I think a lot of times we do just the opposite. We maintain a job that we don't like because we want to maintain a certain income in order to support our family, in order to have a good life or go on vacation or whatever it is. And so the job itself becomes secondary. And really the job is what takes up the majority of our time. And if we can maintain integrity with our truth, with our work, again, that's the majority of our effort in any given day, then that's the place where we're going to find fulfillment. And then everything else is frosting on the cake, if you will.
Which in a case like what you're describing, it sounds like to me the job is what's become the source of the unhappiness in the end.
It does seem that way. It does seem that we go to work and then we can't wait for the evening or the weekend or retirement in order to find our happiness. But we got to find it right now. And kind of what we've been talking about this whole time is if you really accept that life is short, that you don't know how much time you have left, why would you allow yourself to suffer in a job that you don't like 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week and make yourself miserable, unhappy, unfulfilled, and just kind of throw your life away that way?
That might have a lot to do with explaining the corner bar phenomena. Everybody labors for that 5 days, and come Friday, the first thing they do is check into the bar and drown their troubles.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is part of the sad state of affairs of our society. We do have a tendency to ignore our problems and try to use some outside substance to deal with them.
Yeah, but I've seen people do this here before, like what you're talking about. And it seems to me like it always comes back to haunt you in the end. And what happens is you just, over a period of time, you sink lower and lower and lower. And the lower you sink, the harder it is to climb back out of that hole.
Exactly. And that's what happens when we look at life from the outside in. If we're looking at our life and our level of success based on what we've achieved outside of ourselves, by the amount of money in our bank account, by the value of our stock portfolio, by the fact that whether or not we own a house, by our relationships, if we look outside of ourselves to gauge our level of success, we will almost never be fulfilled or happy with the outcome. That's why we have to look from the inside out. We have to come from our truth, because we realize that anything that happens outside of ourselves not only is some kind of reflection of what's happening inside of ourselves, but it's also only relative to what we give meaning to. So it's only significant in that it's a reflection of this physical world, but our truth, our happiness, our fulfillment, everything that really matters only comes from within.
Now, you keep referring to this truth. Now, everybody's truth is going to be different, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. In fact, I mean, that guiding people back to their truth is what the Manual for Living series is all about, is we each have to go back to our truth. You know, we've been taught to go to our church or synagogue, or to go to work, or to go to family or neighbors, and somebody out there will give us the guidance that we desire. But the true answers to our own path are inside of ourselves. So instead of looking outside, we've got to look within. But that's the only way in order to get clarity around what is working and what isn't working in our own life, in our own microcosm.
Would you say maybe recommending finding a quiet time, maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes a day, whatever you can spare, to just sit around and quiet and kind of reflect and you know, do an inventory of yourself? Or I don't know about most other folks, like say me personally, I'll be in the kitchen cooking when there's a lot of quiet and you know, everybody's gone or whatever, and I'll be thinking while I'm cooking, and you know, you'd be surprised what comes to you during these times of reflection, in other words.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Is when our life is chaotic, we have to find peace. And you're absolutely right. You don't have to meditate. You can be doing the dishes or cooking. You can take a walk. You can just sit quietly. I think sometimes we just have to unplug from life for a few minutes in order to hear ourselves, in order to listen to ourselves. But when we're outside in the hubbub and the commotion, it's just that much harder to hear what it is that's being spoken to us.
Yeah, and this is what I've heard a lot of people tell me about meditation, is that it's so hard to do it because of all the background noise of their thoughts, even when they go to bed at night. Some people have to have like a wind-down period because their thoughts just keep running through, and unless they're at least so tired they can't seem to fall asleep. And, well, you can see how that can hinder meditation. How would you recommend somebody get past this here background noise?
You know, I spent 15, 20 years trying to learn how to meditate, and you talk to people, and I went to Shambhala centers and, you know, all these meditation practices, and it just wasn't for me. And so for a while I would just beat myself up. How come I can't meditate? This can't be that hard. I know I'm a spiritual guy. Why is it so difficult to meditate? And then I realized that it's not about sitting in one spot, you know, in that formal pose and closing your eyes, even though that works for a lot of people. But for me, it doesn't work. For me, I need to take a walk. I need to find another avenue to find that sense of peace. But I feel like that in order to create balance in life, we have to create that space. And like you said, it could be anywhere. It could be, you know, when you're sitting at a stoplight for 3 minutes. It could be before a meeting, you're sitting in your car and you have 5 minutes just to collect your thoughts. It could be journaling. It could be doing anything that really allows you to let go, relax, and reconnect with yourself.
Okay. Now, I haven't actually read your newest book. I did read your first one. Can you give us kind of a summary of your newest book, a little bit more of what it covers and what you've already done, without giving away the bookstore, that is?
No, I can give away the bookstore. That's what it's all about. I mean, I didn't write this for the fame and fortune. I wrote it because I felt like it would help a lot of people. But Connection, you know, being the second book, again, is all about our relationship. So it's a relationship to each other, to our spouse, to our children, to our friends, to our coworkers, and it's our relationship to our truth. In many ways, those are the same thing. The issues we have internally will generally be reflected in our relationship. So I go really deep into connection and communication. I talk a lot about, you know, what disagreement is all about and how we have a tendency to want to be right. And in order to do that, we make somebody else wrong, which creates disharmony, which disconnects us from our truth. And so I talk a little bit about that. I talk about judgment and letting go, how we have a tendency to bring the pain of the past in the moment, and that the only way to truly connect is to release the past. I talk about forgiveness, acceptance, getting deep into gratitude, which I think is a key tenet of finding happiness and fulfillment in life. I talk about our attitudes to one another and how our mind kind of controls what we think we see in this world. I go into character and how to live from your heart, how to deepen your friendships, how to find intimacy not just in your relationship with your spouse, but intimate connection with the people that you care about. I talk a little about children because I think that children and family, of course, are kind of a key priority in our lives. And I talk a lot about finding our truth, listening to it, discovering how to fill the void within ourselves, taking responsibility for life, and really making life amazing.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that have told me that they felt like they had a void in their life. But the thing I've never understood is, what is it exactly that creates this kind of a void? I mean, from my perspective, I don't remember having experienced the void, and maybe it's, just, a DNA thing. Maybe it's because I'm under the sign of Leo. I don't know. You got any kind of clues you can give on, what kind of things might lead a person into this kind of a void?
Yeah, I think that whenever you're walking through life and you're not truly happy, and you're not truly fulfilled, then there's a void in your life. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a judgment. It just means that we're here for a unique purpose. And as long as we're ignoring that purpose, then we will feel empty inside in some form or fashion. As long as we're not living from our heart, we're going to feel like there's something missing in our world. And so when we talk about kind of relationships and connections and listening to our truth, if we actually do follow our truth in life, in every relationship, in every connection, in every work environment, we will be fulfilled. We will be happy. But what tends to happen is we get stuck in situations that we don't want to change. Maybe we're in a physically abusive relationship and we're afraid to get out. Maybe we're in a job that we've been in for 15 years and we know we're not really happy, but we're not miserable enough to leave. But so we stick with it and we allow ourselves to be mediocre in our life. And so where some people may turn to drugs or alcohol or addictions to deal with a void they have within themselves, many other people just subsist through life. And I'm not saying that's you. I just think that in general, I was one of those people. I was happy. Things were great. Why would I change anything? But by changing things, I found that there was such a deeper desire for me to do things in life that allowed me to tap into a sense of happiness and fulfillment that I could only dream of beforehand.
So it's kind of, you might say, goes back to a sense of longing or yearning. If I'd only gotten this job instead of this one, if I had gotten married instead of being single, or if I'd had a different mate, but you get yourself in a situation that creates a sort of a yearning or longing for something better, and then you end up staying in it instead of trying to, climb out of the pit, in other words.
Yeah, kind of, but it's not about regret, right? It's really not, it has nothing to do with looking into the past. It has everything to do with looking into the moment and waking up and looking in the mirror and really deciding if we're truly happy. And only we know that. Only us individually can tell us if we're truly happy. We may be happy on the outside. We may pretend to be happy with our spouse and our children and our workplace. But we have to be honest with ourselves. So it's really not a comparative reality. We're not looking to compare ourselves to anybody else or to our past. It's really just looking at ourselves and saying, am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Am I doing what I feel like I'm here to do in this life? And if any of those questions are no, then something has to change.
And what about, and say, like, for example, the situation of a young couple that, gets married, or maybe they even go out and, before they get married, and create a baby. And then later on they have regrets because they weren't ready for parents, to be parents. Do you have any suggestions for people to do something like that? Because you really need to stay with that kid till they're 18, but yet you're hung into something you kind of wish you hadn't done, and you're in the moment, like right now. I'm drugged down. I can't date anymore. I can't, do certain things, other things anymore either. All my money's going to support the baby. What would you recommend to people like that?
Well, first thing is I don't believe in regret. I think regret is the biggest vacuum of energy in our life. There's no sense in it. We can't change anything from the past. Whether it's a baby or a job or something that we did that landed us in prison, it really doesn't matter. We made choices. The big distinction, though, is how we take responsibility for those. And that's really what the first book is all about, is that in order to access our happiness, the first step is taking responsibility. We have to realize that the current state of affairs in our life is of our own doing. We have a tendency to blame everybody else. Maybe we blamed that girlfriend that we had that kind of really wasn't being protected when we actually had sex and we had this baby. Maybe it was my boss. Maybe it was this. We blame everybody for our problems. But if we can start by owning the decisions that we made that created the life as it currently stands, then we're empowered to make different choices. So we can't change the past, but if we look at it from this moment only and we say, gosh, it's not really what I planned on, my life isn't the way I expected it would be, but this is what it is, and this is what I have to deal with, and I'm going to find a way to make it great. And it's going to require us to actually step into our life, and take ownership, take responsibility, and make choices that are consistent with that truth. So it may not be the easy answer. It may not be what somebody in that kind of situation wants to hear. But the truth is that we're guided in life. We're guided throughout everything that we do. And if we find ourselves in a situation that doesn't feel right, we need to listen and see if it's something that actually could be supportive in our life. Maybe having that baby was the best thing that could ever have happened to you. Maybe it stepped you out of maybe walking into a path that would have landed you in jail or something worse. So maybe this path to have a child has actually given you a lease on life, a chance to do something better with yourself. And that's something that we have to be open to, we have to be aware of.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, too. But what I'm getting at, before I forget, I wanted to mention, I put your link in the chat room. It's www.manualforliving.com. Y'all can also just Google Seth David Chernoff, and that'll take you right to the results page where he's very up high on the top of, I think, the very first link, in fact. His book is right here on the front page. I'm going to move it to my archive tomorrow along with this here show for people that didn't make it live or that are just listening at iTunes or Shoutcast, and also for you people listening at different locations. I don't see in my chat room. The call-in number is 832-632-7904. And also I'd like to mention to everybody not to forget to drop by United International Paranormal.ning. It's a social network. They got all kinds of people that are from around the globe. They got state chapters for almost everybody nowadays, for ghost hunting, UFO research, and almost anything you might want to get involved in. We kind of plug each other, so I hope you didn't mind that, David.
Not at all.
But yeah, I was going to say that, I was prodding you for these here questions because what I'm doing is I'm thinking of people that have actually gotten themselves involved in these type of situations, because the thought occurs to me that if I know people and there's other people listening who know people or whatever, and they might could recommend that, them to this show, maybe to check out your book and maybe get some feedback from it, in other words. So that's why I thought it might be a good idea to ask.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate that, and I'm always I'm here because I feel like this information is there to help people, and that's what it's all about.
And you originally was your first books, I believe, was corporate type books or business type books, weren't they?
No, actually, but I have started a number of companies. I've sold a few companies. I've shut down one that didn't work out. I mean, I've kind of been through the business world and really enjoy that part of life. I feel like you can't disconnect from this world. I mean, I think we're here to be a part of it, and that means that wherever we find a place where we can be of value, we're here to engage and interact and to do our part.
Well, in your personal opinion, do you think perhaps you're finding a more spiritual path and feeling better about yourself might have been part of the cure for your cancer?
That's a good question. I guess I've always been on a spiritual path since as far back as I can remember. And I think the difference was that when I got cancer the first time, it really awakened me to do something that was a little bit different than I was doing in my career. So up to that point, there was this kind of inner voice inside of me that was hollering at me and telling me and guiding me to do something different, to start writing. And I just didn't want to do it. I just really ignored it. At one point, it was just screaming at me, and I said, hey, look, I'm busy. I got a life. I've got a family. I don't have time for that kind of stuff. Well, and then sometimes you get sick, and illness is a great teacher. And because of that, I started writing. And I wrote for 5 years straight while I was working and had my family. And I wrote and wrote and wrote. And after about 5 years, I got cancer a second time. And then I realized that I needed to take all that writing and get it out in the world. And so it took me another 5 years to get all the writing organized in a way that I felt like it was ready for people to embrace. And then it took me another year or two to actually get it to the world. So it's been kind of a very interesting and a very fun and rewarding journey that way.
Sounds like it's been a rather long journey, too.
Some things in life take longer than others, don't they?
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the dream that you have and kind of what your desire is. And it's funny, sometimes the things that take longer, tend to be more rewarding and fulfilling because you realize what it took and what kind of investment it took to get you there.
Well, yeah, I was asking that also because I I've read articles online that indicate that scientists have learned recently, or the medical profession has, that your emotions and how you feel about yourself, your esteem, and that is really directly related to your immune system, and that having a better emotional and spiritual life actually strengthens the immune system to ward off things like cancer, in other words.
Oh, it absolutely does. It's all interrelated. It absolutely is. We either learn from illness or a result of the physical problems in our life will be reflected in illness at some point or time or another. I mean, stress naturally will create physical hardship and pain. Emotional trauma will reflect itself in physical bodily pain or trauma. And so, yes, absolutely. It's kind of like what you were saying earlier. Yes, we are all interrelated, but so is every part of our life. If we're anguished in any part of our being, it will absolutely affect the other elements of our life.
You know, I know like some people, or a lot of people, though, they go on in denial. They have these kind of issues for years on end. And, I think that just tends to hurt people. I'm pretty sure you would agree with that.
Yeah, denial is a funny thing. I just think there's a lot of things that we do to put barricades in between where we are and where we want to be. We come up with lots of excuses as to why we aren't going to choose or step into our greatness. We blame people. We say that there's no time, or I can't quit my job because I need the money, or I can't do this because, my grandfather is dying. And we come up with any kind of excuse as to why we shouldn't be living our greatness in this life. But the truth is that we can't let anything stand between who we are and what we're here to do in this life. So it's either denial, or it's regret, or it's pain, or it's any number of things that we come up with in order to prevent ourselves from actually taking risks and doing what we're here to do.
Which goes back to what you were saying you went through with your cancer treatment that second time. You were were kind of putting off and having reasons not to write, and until after you confronted that. So it sounds like this one from experience, in other words.
Oh, yeah, many times. Many times. And I do think that, for me, it's kind of a life or death thing. I really felt like I was going to die with my second cancer. I thought that was it. I got all my affairs in order. I said goodbye. And when I woke up, I realized, gosh, I'm still here. I guess it's time to kind of get back on my path and do it the right way. And I just made a decision that no matter what happened, I was going to step forward and continue along my journey, no matter how long it took and, what sacrifices I had to make. And I think that in life we have a tendency to get very complacent. We get comfortable in our house, in our relationships, in our work, and we don't want to change anything. And so we sacrifice what could be an amazing amount of happiness and fulfillment and reward for the complacency of our life.
Yeah, I think I've been guilty of that when I was younger, and maybe even still now. I'm not even aware I'm doing it. Sometimes you can even tend to deceive yourself. I never would have believed that when I was younger. But I found out over the years that what you know when you're young and what you know when you're old are two different things.
Yeah, many times it is, but I do think that our inner truth never changes. But it's right. There is wisdom that comes from age. There's wisdom that comes from, making decisions and dealing with the consequences, and realizing that we do have a choice and that we do control, what happens in our life. And I think, through age, you have a certain wisdom that allows you to think through things in a way that many of our younger generations haven't learned how to do yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of, truth in that there. I really do believe that. Now, I wanted to ask you, while we still had 20 minutes or 22 minutes left, if there was anything you have new coming up.
As far as events and so forth?
Events, new books, workshops or whatever?
Yeah. So I've been doing this workshop. It's called True Happiness Regardless of Circumstance. And, I think a lot of people sacrifice their happiness because of something that's going on in their life. Whether it's getting sick or somebody around them getting sick, or not having enough money, or having a problem in their job, or whatever it is. So I've been doing this seminar series, which has been a lot of fun. I've got a bunch of radio interviews, a few lectures coming up. Working on an audio series that goes along with the book, and a workbook that goes along with the series, and then there's a third book in the series which comes out next year. So I've got a lot of stuff in the works, but I would just say if you want to follow me, you can go to my website, and you can follow me on Facebook, which is just facebook.com/manual for living, and get posted on everything that's going on. But really right now it's all about kind of bringing this book connection out into the world and sharing it with, whoever I can.
Now, this book Connections is your second one in the series, A Manual for Living. What's the third one?
So the third one's called Purpose. So again, reality has to do with our relationship to being physical, to how we live in this life in a great and empowering way. And then the second book, Connection, takes that even deeper to how we connect with our truth, how we take that into the world, how we relate to one another. And the third book is called Purpose, and how we get clear on what our unique purpose is in life and how we live that through our connections, through this physical environment in a way that's fulfilling and empowering.
Now, that sounds really interesting. And, the interesting thing is, I've been to other people's radio shows. I've been to church. I've been to a lot of places. And that word purpose comes up an awful lot. It's like it's a big unknown something out there that everybody's looking for and nobody knows how to find. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I do get a lot of people call me and say, I just can't figure out what my purpose is in life. And I think it's because we're all looking for this big, grandiose purpose, like this huge vision for life that's going to transform everything. It's got to be, we just think that it's got to be some huge things. But the truth is that our impacts, however little they may seem, they reverberate around the world. They impact people for lifetimes to come. And so we can't disregard whatever contributions we have in this life as not being meaningful. And so I always tell people, what's the purpose that you discover in this moment? And maybe you have clarity around a bigger purpose. I know a lot of times I do in certain areas of my life, but sometimes I don't. And so it's really a matter of just showing up in the moment. As we talked about earlier, we control who we choose to be and the actions that we take. And so it's really focusing on those two things and doing it in a way that's consistent with our own inner truth. And through that, we will discover and get clarity around whatever purpose that we're here to live.
Right. Now, I do tend to agree with you. A lot of people, I don't know, and I think it might have to do with the environmental teaching you get as you're growing up, seem to think that purpose has a big special thing like a big star or a president or a congressman or whatever the case may be, versus the fact that they don't realize that, purpose can be something you enjoy doing. Pretty much, if you're making yourself happy, then it's easier for you to make other people happy. And we're not talking about, being selfish and looking out only for you, but we're talking about putting the horse before the cart, in other words.
Yeah, I think it has to do with kind of how we value certain professions in our society as well. We have a tendency to look down upon janitors and garbage men and even teachers sometimes compared to politicians and celebrities and presidents. And it just doesn't work that way. There's no hierarchy. There isn't really one person who's more important than another. We all are making a contribution that impacts people for lifetimes to come. If you look at some of the greatest people in this that we value in this world, whether it's Steve Jobs or presidents or big athletes, they've had people like you and me all along the way that have helped touch them and guide them and move them along and move them forward. And so it's not like they've gotten there in a bubble, and it's not like they've gotten there because they took one path to life. It's that they kind of went out in the world in their own way just like we do, and eventually blocks fell into place and doors opened, and they worked their way to a place that was fulfilling and rewarding for them. And, we do the same thing. We show up every day, we do our part, we follow our journey, and it doesn't matter if we're cleaning up throw up or we're, talking on the radio. We're doing our part to make the world a better place.
I would tend to agree. It wasn't long ago, me and my son Joshua watched a movie that had Stone Cold Steve Austin in. I don't remember the name of the movie, but he had evidently been a boxer or a fighter in the past, according to the storyline of the movie, that ended up as a janitor. I think he had accidentally injured somebody or something, or, whatever the case may be. But I'm talking about this because you reminded me when you mentioned the word janitor. But during the course of his tenure as a janitor, he had a big influence on another child there that was trying to train to be a fighter that was getting, blackballed, so to speak, and wasn't doing really well. So, you'd be surprised how even a janitor, if people want to call it even a janitor, the kind of strong influence. I mean, if you're a janitor at a school, for example, there's a lot of young minds around there that you could be an example for, be there for if they need help, or they might, need a friend or something like that. And if you had wanted to shy away from a job as a janitor because it was beneath you, you could have just shied away from greatness in a form that you may not have even realized you could have had.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right. It really doesn't matter what society deems valuable. It's really kind of how we contribute and how we're of service. And how little it may seem at the time, again, our contributions, they reverberate all over the place.
So we're really kind of like the pieces in a puzzle, or say a group of people putting together a puzzle. Each person has a little bit of the piece, and they're responsible for their own piece, but yet they have to work with the people with their own pieces before you get to the actual entire whole, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, as they say, it takes a village, right? I mean, sometimes, it takes a lot of people doing little things to contribute to some big, grandiose adventure, and that really is what life's all about. It's each of us doing our part in whatever method or manner feels consistent with our truth in a way that's rewarding and fulfilling, that gets us to where we want to be.
Okay. Now, I was just sitting here thinking while I was listening to you, but yeah, I think you've hit so many great points during this here show that a lot of people, I think, including myself, have not always wanted to think about. And sometimes I have, sometimes I didn't think about it till later on. But, I mentioned earlier I had read your book, the first one, Reality, and I found it to be very practical and very informative and, very useful. And I would have recommended it to anybody. And I'm pretty sure that this book and the one you got coming up, without even seeing them yet, are going to be, very useful and very much, some people call it must-reads, in other words. Good things to have around your house, good things to share with people, people that that are maybe even down and out. They might read it and you might get some thoughts from it or something. But I definitely think that you're making a big difference just by putting the material out there, in other words. And I'm quite sure a lot of people will walk into Barnes and Noble and they'll see your book and pick it up and, whoa, what's this? You know what I'm saying?
I really appreciate that. I really hope it does do what I believe it's meant to do, which is to kind of help people have access to their own sense of truth and access to fullness of their being. And I think sometimes we can use some pointers and tips, and whether it's this book or another book or, the people in our life or a good show on the radio. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there, and I think it's our job to continue seeking and searching until we get the answers we're looking for.
Yeah, I kind of tend to think the mind's meant to be kind of like a sponge in some ways. It's just there to, absorb knowledge, and it's also a sponge with a processor that processes it and just has to determine where to use it, when to use it, and how to use it, in other words.
It is very interesting that way. I mean, if we're actually open to learn and we realize that we're here to grow and to evolve, then we can maintain an awareness that allows us to continue learning no matter what the experience looks like from the outside.
And I guess I agree with what you said earlier too. You can really make a big difference anywhere that you choose to be at any given point in time. The whole big secret to it is, I think, like you said earlier, be all that you can be at any given moment. Don't, kind of erase you're against the word regret. I'm kind of against the word can't. Erase that from your vocabulary. It's at least as much as you can.
Yeah, my grandmother used to tell me that ever since I was a little baby. She said, don't ever use the word can. And you'd use the word can, and then she'd come after you. So you can't use that word in my house. And you can't. Can't.
I always told my boys.
It's definitely one. What's that? Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't know you was fixing to speak again. I apologize. I was just going to say that I always told my boys can't, never could do nothing.
It's true. And it's these things in life that we allow to stand between us and where we want to be. We just come up with excuses or reasons why we can't do things in life, why we can't succeed in life. And it's all just a misnomer. It's all just in our imagination. There's opportunities everywhere for each of us who chooses to kind of step forward on our path.
So a good place to start, like you said, take a look at yourself. Ask yourself questions. What do I like? Can I apply this to employment? Should I apply it to family? Is this something that I could do in a public arena or whatever? And once you find out what it is, pursue it to its logical conclusion, and through it you'll find fulfillment.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, a lot of people, and I think a lot of our younger generation say, well, gosh, as soon as I get the perfect job, everything will be great. As soon as I get the perfect wife, everything's going to be great. And we know that's not how it works. It's all the little things. And that, I guess, is really what the Manual for Living book series is all about. It's all the little things. You know, there's like 72 or 75 chapters in each book, each signifying an area of our life that when mastered will contribute to our overall sense of happiness and fulfillment. So whether it's how we relate to time, how we forgive, how we let go of judgment, how we move forward in life from a sense of peace or gratitude, all those little things give us access to something great. So whether it's reflected in our work or reflected in our relationships, it's based on the inner work that we do to get us to that place.
Right. And I can also be a witness to what you're saying, because I know in my life, I've been married 23 years now. When I first got married, we went through a real stormy period where she was trying to change me to something she liked, and I was trying to change her to something I liked. And, well, once we got through that there battle some, 18, 19 years later, we began to find our way back toward each other. But we had to first realize that it wasn't up to us to change our mate. It was up to us to change ourselves for the better, in other words. And then...
Yeah, that's great.
But, I mean, you know, I think there would probably be less divorce, though, if people would, you know, start looking and saying, what am I bringing to this table? Maybe if I bring the right stuff to the table, I won't have to change my mate. My mate would just automatically bring the right stuff as a natural outcrop of it, in other words.
Well, it's kind of like, you know, again, what we can control. You know, we can't change anybody, but we sure do try, don't we? I mean, we really can only focus on ourselves and our own truth. And so if we're not showing up in a way that's consistent with our own truth, and by that I mean in relationship, it's standing in our own greatness. It's showing up in a way that's consistent with our own truth. If we walk in to the house and our spouse, for whatever reason, had a bad day and they're taking it out on us, that's really not our stuff. It's not our problem. We've got to be consistent with our truth. And so we don't need to get in an argument with our spouse because they're angry and they're trying to blame it on us, and we're trying to show them that they are angry and make sure they're aware of it. It's just really us maintaining our sense of peace and inner balance so that we can move forward in life.
You know, don't accept what they're giving, but don't give out at the same time. Because and so many times when you try to give it back, you're going to get more of it back.
Yeah, it just degrades, right? It just gets worse. And the real solution is just to kind of stand in our own truth and be strong within ourselves and know that everything always works out. And so sometimes it means just letting go. You know, like you said, not trying to change our other person, only really focusing on ourselves and how we can be of service, how we can show up in a way that's meaningful.
And the one thing I did learn, if you're looking to be happy by changing the other person, not going to happen. That's a long, hard tow. I'm here to let you know from experience.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But we do that anyway. I mean, we do it in life. We try to make the job, you know, the job fit ourselves. We try to make our house fit ourselves. We try to create everything around us to fit into the life that we desire. And at some point, we can just accept our surroundings and say, you know what, I'm just going to accept it the way it is, and I'm going to show up in a way that's of service. I'm going to show up in a way that's more giving than I ever thought I would want to be. And we show up from a place of service, and we're rewarded in so many ways that we just couldn't imagine.
Yeah, it sounds like a case of misplaced control, which I'm sure there's a lot of things that's misplaced in today's society. But I was going to mention the show has 7 minutes remaining. I wanted to see if you had any last-minute thoughts for everybody out there.
You know, I guess I would say that obstacles are a natural part of this life. We're all going to be challenged, whether it's through illness, through death, through people we care about that betray us, maybe through physical abuse, or whatever it is. We're all going to be challenged in every area of our life throughout our entire life. And if we can just accept that that's part of this physical existence, that we don't have to berate ourselves when these situations happen, that actually going out in this world and facing these experiences is a part of this life, if we can embrace that, then we at some point can realize that we can still maintain our sense of happiness and well-being no matter what's going on around us. No matter what obstacles we face, we do not need to let these obstacles control our sense of well-being and happiness, that we actually can control a sense of happiness. So if we actually can embrace and understand and expect that challenges will happen, then all of a sudden we can find that sense of peace and understanding that there are things outside of our control, kind of like you were just saying. That, yes, we do try to control everything, but again, we can only control who we choose to be and the actions we take. Everything else is outside of our control. But through that, we are actually empowered to have a say in where our world goes and what happens.
And we sure enough have a choice in how we perceive what happens to us, how we perceive our mates, our bosses, our coworkers, anything that's around us. Perception is a matter of choice. We can perceive a person as an a-hole or a person as being troubled at the time, for example. And again, this perception ends up reflecting your outlook in the end.
It absolutely does. The more that we try to control the outcome of anything that's outside of our control, the more we're going to be disappointed.
And I think maybe sometimes we might want to realize that it doesn't matter what the outside influence is. Sometimes we just need to remember the remedy to it. It's the same. You can't stereotype everything like that, but I think there are times that you can.
Well, again, it just goes back to kind of focusing on our own truth and, what can you control, what can you let go of. The outside world is a reflection, for the most part, of our inner weather. And so if we can relinquish our attachment to outcome outside of ourselves and we focus on our own inner weather, our own inner contribution to being of service, then our outside life tends to transform itself in a way that's consistent with that own inner truth.
And I've seen that. It does really happen that way. I mean, once I quit trying to change my wife, she actually quit trying to change me. And we can actually go long periods of time, weeks and months, without quarreling like we used to. So, it makes a whole big difference, believe it or not. When I was younger, I'd say, nah, this ain't going to work. I had to do it, but I found out I was going about it the whole wrong way. Too bad I didn't have your book back then.
Well, 22 years is a long time. I'm sure you've learned a lot of things in that time.
Now, also, I want to mention one more time that his website's www.manualforliving. And I also want to ask y'all, if y'all like my show, pass it around, share it with everybody. Don't forget to tell them I have archives here. Just click on the archive link in the menu on the left-hand side. And I will be posting this show over at YouTube so that people can listen to it over there. And I wanted to tell everybody also to come back Tuesday, and I will be having Lamont Wood on, and we're going to talk about out of place in time, space and time. He's wrote a book about objects that appeared up, and we found artifacts that has been found recently from a prior time that really looked like it belonged in a future time. That's why he calls them out of place in space and time, because the technology looks a little bit better or more advanced than what it was at the time that it was actually invented, in other words. So this promises to be an interesting interview, and I hope everybody makes it. That's going to be Tuesday night at 8 p.m. and Central Standard Time, and I'm trying to, there it is, Tuesday, October 18th. Oh, wow. This is the 18th. Boy, this month is getting away from me. I'm sitting there reading that, and I'm like, have we gotten this far in the month? And my mind blew for a second. I'm sorry about that. So, Seth, I wanted to thank you for coming, and I'd kind of like to have you come back. You've already told all my listeners about the reality and about connection, and, well, I wouldn't want to leave them, in the dark about the purpose, in other words.
Well, I would be happy to come back, and I'll definitely look forward to sharing with your listeners and connecting with you when that book comes out, probably sometime in the fall. And
for people listening elsewhere, you can find my site at www.paranormalpalace.com, and you can find links to buy the book on my site as well as on Seth's site. You can also find them in Barnes & Noble and Amazon and any other, I'm pretty sure most other book dealers. It's hard to say any, but I'm not sure how the publication system works. I'm pretty sure Seth knows more about that than me, but I know most people buy at Barnes & Noble and Amazon. I'm fairly sure you can buy them there. Is that correct, Seth?
Yes, everywhere books are sold, you can find the book, and of course iTunes and everywhere else.
All righty. Well, Seth, I tell you what, it's been a pleasure having you here. I've really enjoyed the talk, and it's been eye-opening as usual, and I really do appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and call a wrap on this in here and start tonight's supper.
All right, fantastic. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. You have a good one.
before you know it, you'll find yourself in a similar situation, and you'll wonder, how come the same kind of women keep showing up in your life, or the same kind of people, or the same kind of jobs, or the same kind of bosses? And unless we're willing to do the work and learn the lessons and grow, we're the ones that have to live with the choices that we make. And so it is very true. It's really who we choose to be in this life that is the limiter between a mediocre life and a life well lived.
So would you say then, in your opinion, that what's taking place here is the law of attraction? People are attracting the kind of people that they're actually mirroring on the inside, for example?
I do think there's some of that, but it's so much deeper than that. It's not based on who we're attracting from the outside. It's based on who we're choosing to be from the inside, not because we want to attract anything, but because we choose that in this life we are going to take control of our path to greatness. And that means taking responsibility for who we're being and the actions that we're taking. Now, that will naturally be reflected in the outside world, but it starts from within ourselves. And I think that's kind of a key distinction, is that we have to first make choices that have us feel good about our life and good about ourselves. And then as we do that, yes, people will be attracted in our life, but we will also be making decisions in our world that are consistent with our truth. And over time, our entire environment will be consistent with that truth.
It sounds like a toss-old axiom, physician, know yourself.
Know yourself. And I think in the end of the first book, I think at the very last chapter, I have a quote on every chapter, as you may remember, and the last one is know thyself. And I think that's what life's all about, is that it really is our own inner journey that will take us through this life and allow us to tap into whatever is our unique purpose in life.
Which that, of course, explains why there's so many people. You always hear people talk to you.
We do. And as you know, I'm a cancer survivor. We've talked about this on the last time I was on your show, and it's those kind of traumatic situations where you have to deal with your own inner demons. You have to look yourself in the eye and accept that if death is the outcome, then you have to make peace with it, and if it's not, then you have to understand that you can find gratitude for life. And it's like you said, you can either choose to be grateful and kind to these people in this world, or you can be begrudging and angry and upset and make your entire life experience a reflection of those inner feelings.
Well, it sounds to me like, Seth, you hit the nail right on the head when you said make peace with yourself, because I think so much of what really causes a lot of the problems with connecting with yourself as well as with other humans is the things that we're not willing to make peace with.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think a lot of times we kind of try to ignore some of the things that we face. And first and foremost, we do have to make peace with ourselves. It's kind of like in relationship, you have to be able to love yourself first before you can ever fully love another. But we have a tendency to look outside of ourselves for what we really need. We look outside for love. We look outside for fulfillment, and we'll never find it there.
That is true. So many people, I've heard people preach on this here, and for years it never really sank home to me until I got older, but it did eventually sink that, people think, well, if I get a nicer house, I'll be happy. If I get a better car, I'll be happy. And so much of the time, once they get what they want, they're still looking because they found out that they were wrong. That wasn't what they wanted in the first place. And then the few people that seem like they really are happy, they're contented with their lot in life, and they don't have no problem with being happy.
Yeah, it's very true. It's kind of like wherever you go, there you are. If you're in a bad relationship and you don't learn the lesson, but you get out of it.
Talk about them. I wish I could be like this athlete, or I wish I could be like that movie star, or this author, or that author, or whatever the case may be, because they're not achieving the goals that they want to achieve, and they're looking on the outside instead of on the inside.
Yeah, and that is the way our society is based. If you look at the way we identify ourselves, when we meet people, what do you do? Well, I'm a doctor, I'm a janitor, I'm a nurse, I'm a father, I'm a cancer survivor. We have this identity for ourselves that we put out into the world, but that identity really isn't who we are. It's a reflection of the past. And so we really do get to choose who we're going to be in any given moment. That doesn't have to be a reflection of that outside identity. Yet our society definitely looks towards that identity, like you said, whether we're a celebrity athlete or whether we have a certain amount of money or a certain kind of car. But the only way to access freedom in our life is to relinquish that and to realize that we are really only who we choose to be in this moment.
Which would mean also that you don't want to try to own anything that anybody tries to label you with.
You can't really. I mean, think about it. Even in the world of sports, which is definitely a hot subject, in the world of sports, you have sports teams that are outstanding and excellent, but they're only as good as they are in any given moment. One team wins, one team loses. The next week, that same team may lose, and then that team isn't quite as good technically as they were the week before. It's kind of like how we are in life. We might do something really great in one week, but next week maybe we're not as kind, we're not as gracious, we're not as friendly, we're not as giving. Well, it's only who we are in this moment that makes all the difference. It really has very little to do with who we've been in the past.
Yeah, I know that a lot of the ancient gurus or sages or shaman, they always taught that there really is, would you say?
Yeah, kind of. And the basis for it is that, when things happen in life, because they always do, whether it's illness or the loss of somebody we care about, we have a tendency to feel all alone. And it's really these interconnections that we have through our own truth with each other that allow us to feel like we're not alone and to understand that we're all going through many of the same things.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, they do feel like they're, one way that I've heard it put before was an island unto themselves, and I don't really think anybody can be an island unto themselves when everything's interconnected.
Yeah, I agree with you, although it does feel that way sometimes. And at the end of the day, we are really alone. I mean, we go to bed, fall asleep on our own, we deal with pain on our own, we deal with death on our own, even though we may have people with us. Many parts of this journey are on our own. They're independent of anybody else. However, the fact of being human, of relating in this physical environment, requires that we be connected to one another. So I think it's a balance, but I think we have to remember that being connected is what makes this human experience so great.
Kind of drawing the line between where do I look out for myself without expecting help or giving help, and kind of where do I give and get both at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of like what you're saying. It's like, where do I stop? Where do I start and where do I stop? Like, where does my being end in this world? And it's like you said, we are all interconnected, but it's how we accept that even when we're going through situations and feeling things that we don't think that anybody else is dealing with.
Yeah, and a lot of times when we're at our downest, we don't want to reach out. We don't want people reaching out to us, and we, tend to snap at people or, push people away. Really probably not always the best thing in the world we can do, but again, we do deal with human nature.
Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce, the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be Seth David Chernoff. And he's going to be talking about a new book that he's got out called A Manual for Living, subtitled Connections, if I got that title down correctly. He's been on once before about Manual for Living, subtitle, I think it was Reality if Memory Serves, and I'm sure he can correct me on that in just a minute. He's a cancer survivor, and his goal is to kind of light the path to happiness through human connection, which I'm quite sure a lot of y'all might want to say we've heard this here before, but, if it's worked for him, it could work for you is what I'm thinking. We can all sure enough try to at least give an ear and have an open mind. So, Seth, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Royce. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Was I right about those book titles?
Yes, Manual for Living Reality was the one we were on talking about last time, and this one is called Connection, just came out a few weeks ago.
Now, this is a continuation of the last one, am I correct?
Yeah, it's a series. There's 3 books in the series. The first one is all about our relationship to kind of being human, how we relate to money and time and illness and death and life. And the second book, Connection, is all about kind of taking that deeper. It's all about our interconnection to our truth, our relationships to one another, and kind of how we take that out into the world.
So kind of like sort of taking an inventory of yourself and how you relate to yourself as well as to others?